we just wanted to sort of, in one sense, get back to basics, but in another sense, push things forward and just make something that was like more lush and full and just rich sounding than anything we've done before.
Welcome to Audio Technology Magazine's ISO Booth podcast, where we phone audio engineers and producers at home. And thanks to the pandemic lockdown, they answer.
Hey everyone, Chris here, and welcome to another Audio Technology ISO Booth conversation. I'm pleased to welcome Something for Kate frontman Paul Dempsey and producer Nick DiDia to the ISO Booth. Thanks for joining us, chaps.
Good to be here.
The new album, The Modern Medieval, it's a real virtuoso performance. There's enormous maturity in the songwriting and the performances and the production. It's almost like weird to say, almost like a sort of a countercultural statement to produce something, really, really good, really polished. Was that something of an intention?
It definitely was on our part that we wanted to make a really hi-fi sounding record. And that, we just wanted it to sound as good and rich and clear and present as possible. Yeah, we've made a lot of records now and a lot of, rock records and they've all had, a slightly different tone. Some of them have been more or less live sounding. Some of them have been more kind of studio crafted. Our last record in particular was kind of very sonically experimental, and there was a lot of really deliberately processed sounds. And I think this time we just wanted to sort of, in one sense, get back to basics, but in another sense, push things forward and just make something that was like more lush and full and just rich sounding than anything we'd done before.
And from a production point of view, was there like an inspiration or like a template or something that you looked to even from the past that said, hey, those albums from this era like just sounded so full and rich and, is that, were there any instructions to your producers?
I think Nick will recall that, we often spoke of like Cheap Trick and, even like Pat Benatar. Like, I think the 80s were a bit of a touchstone, not necessarily in trying to emulate sounds, but just in that sort of unabashed ambition to make a really great hi-fi, big, epic, dramatic sounding record. And I think, like you said, almost like a countercultural thing, because the trend for a while now has sort of, I say trend, I don't want to generalize, but, there's a lot of home recording, which is great. And a lot of it, there's a lot of stuff that has like this quite charming homemade quality to it, and that's great. There's a place for all of that, but this isn't a homemade record. We went to a studio with an awesome producer, and we wanted it to sound that way.
And I guess, Nick, like from the 80s, bands were holed up in residential studios for thousands of dollars a day with teams of producers, and they were literally burning suitcases of money on fireplaces. And then
I think I've done that actually. I wish I hadn't.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice to just have had the
yeah, just one of those. If I just held on to one of those suitcases, yeah,
that's right. And then they finish up in enormous mix rooms with SSLs the size of aircraft carriers and spend weeks mixing. Like, I guess recreating that was not going to happen, but how did you approach it from, what was your mindset?
I think, well, in general, I think that the studio where I'm at now, that Paul and everyone came to, is kind of a combination of that old school. We've got an SSL, got all the, a lot of hardware gear, but it's set in a house and it's a little less, there's a lot of light. So it's a little less cave-like and it doesn't cost as much as the old studios. But it's still, I think it has that, it's relaxed, maybe a little more relaxed than an old older type studio, but it's also, I guess, it has all the pro stuff too. So I think it's a good. I love working that way. I don't know if I can go back to the old being in a control room with no windows and you got to go through 6 doors to have a face-to-face with somebody. This, as Paul will mention, and there may be pictures of the studio at some point that, I'm in the room with everybody. The only guy who's kind of isolated, but he's behind a big piece of glass that feels like you're in the same room as the drummer. But I can just literally, if we finish a take, I can talk to everyone, not necessarily.
So
that to me it's a really different feeling than the old way. Occasionally I have to sometimes be careful about my initial reaction because you used to be able to get away with saying stuff before you held the talk back button down.
I have to say that Nick, like it was new for us as well. Like, but doing takes and having eye contact with the producer is a new thing as well. And Nick has a very concentrated gaze when he's got the cans on and you're doing takes and he's listening, and he has a very a heavy look of concentration, and it's different and interesting being able to see that. It's good. It brings the best out.
Yeah, I recently, I may go off on tangents. Anyway, I recently was in a situation where someone else was producing and I was engineering, and it was with an artist that I work with all the time. And she kept, after each take, she'd say things to him, and I was just like, "Is that what I sound like?" It's like, "Hey, that was really good. Listen, that was really. You're almost there. It's getting really close. But can we just try that one more time?" I think it's a standard producer sort of one-on-one. You want to keep things moving, but I do really think that, all kidding aside, it really does. It makes a better record. I think that everyone's kind of in the same room. Everyone's feeling it at the same time, and I feel that because a lot of times my reaction is, I hear things and it sounds good, but I'll often say to the drummer, especially, like, "How'd that one feel?" Because I don't underestimate that thing where the band goes, "Holy crap, that made us feel something." It's like, well, yes, that's a good reaction, and I don't discount that at all. So.
Yeah,
and it is absolutely, like, it's a revelatory experience to work in a studio that is just flooded with natural light, and you're looking at the ocean. I don't think I could ever go back to another studio either.
Yeah, I guess this pursuing this idea of producing an album that is classy and accomplished and sort of counterculturally kind of amazing. What does that mean, like, all the way through, from songwriting through recording and mixing and arranging? Like, does it, maybe a question for Nick first, like, does it, like, what does it mean, when you've got the guys in the studio and you're, choosing mics and you're getting sounds, and does it change your mindset knowing that it's less about sort of vibe and experimentation, and it's more about really nailing an amazing performance?
Well, it's definitely that part at the end that you mentioned. It's always about that. I think it's always, regardless of your approach to the record, it's always about trying to catch the great performance. I will say, the demos that Paul sent me, were incredible. Like, I never get demos like that are that well thought out and they sound that good. And I just had this conversation with people. Are always asking, what does a producer do? And the real answer is you do whatever needed to make a great record. And in this case, for me, it was less about me. Paul's production on the stuff was already, the arrangements and all that stuff. I don't know if I changed much at all. My job, I felt my job was making it sound, which I always try to do, is make it sound really alive and like a band. But also, we'll get into this later, the process, I think, was always, from their point of view, that they do these demos, pretty intricate. We cut the stuff, they spend time with it, and then someone else mixed it. Howie, his last name is escaping me. but Howie Beck. So, and I think if there was any rawness or looseness to it, that's kind of maybe what I brought, a little bit of that. And then Howie kind of, in a really good way, maybe cleaned that up a little bit. And somewhere the two became what Paul and the band were looking for, hopefully. I'm really happy with it. But it's also one of those things where, again, my role as a producer was different on this record than maybe some other records, just because of the preparation that was there before I even got involved.
Paul?
Well, yeah, I mean, our approach has, especially over the last few records, has been to, and, you know, just as I've become a little more confident with, you know, engineering our own stuff at home and recording decent sounding demos, and as I get more into, you know, this whole, you know, sound recording stuff, you know, I want to try and do it better each time. So over the years, the demos have gotten more and more realized. Some of them might even be, you know, releasable. But the thing is, our attitude is like, the reason though we don't kind of just do that and make our own records is because there's always something that we haven't thought of. And I know that I can't be objective enough about our stuff to sign off on it and go, okay, this is the record. I know that there's some other clever person out there, you know, like Nick, who is going to think of things that we just don't think of. So we do really realize demos. We get as prepared as we can possibly be. We leave nothing to chance, precisely so that we can then go into the studio and leave everything to chance. And by being really, really prepared, it means that you have the confidence to walk into a studio with a new person, a producer, and, you know, be completely open to whatever they throw at you. And, you know, and you don't feel like you're like the ground is shifting under you, because, you know, you've kind of already made the record in your head, so you're ready to make it again. And, you know, Nick's, I mean, you know, I mean, given everything Nick just said, the stuff that was really important was often, it was the non-technical suggestions that really mattered. You know, I remember one of the first things that happened was Nick suggested that we move a song up, that we move the key up a little bit, which is, on the one hand, the most frightening thing a producer has ever said to me, because I have kind of perfect pitch, and once things are in my head a certain way, I find it really difficult to have them move. You know, if I do covers of songs, I can only ever do them in the original key. I get transposing things freaks me out. But at the same time, it was also the most exciting thing a producer had ever heard, because it really indicated to me that that Nick wasn't just thinking about sonics and the technical stuff, that he was also thinking about, you know, how do you get the most emotional punch out of a song, and how do you, you know, how do you get how do you, like, maybe moving my voice up that bit is going to make my voice sound different in a way that's going to bring the song alive. And so it was really exciting straight away to know that Nick already, that he thought of everything. And like I said, that he was thinking of the things that we hadn't thought of. So that also is really important producer stuff that not all producers can do.
For sure. And I guess as much as it pains me to kind of move from some really cool philosophical stuff, which I know our readers love, but they also love, you know, the names of the mics you used.
So, all the tech stuff. I can geek out with the best of them.
So maybe could I start with Paul? Like, what's your setup based on it? Am I right in thinking you're an Apollo guy?
Yeah, and I've been using the Apollo for 5 or 6 years now, just because moving the Pro Tools HD and the massive looms of cables and all that stuff, it was just so great to get that out of my room and get something with one Thunderbolt cable and or lightning bolt, whatever it's called. and I've just really enjoyed the UA plugins, and as of 6 months ago, whenever it was released, I've also started using Luna as my interface, and I love it. I'm never going back.
So why? What's it doing?
It just seems like you can do all the things that I used to do in Pro Tools. It just feels like I can do all of them in less steps. With less drop-down menus or less flipping between the edit window and the mix window. It's just really, it's all there in the edit screen. Even just things like just the necessary steps to create new tracks and what types of tracks they are and which channel they're coming in. It's just all there in front of you.
Yeah, okay.
And I really like the their plugins and their Unison stuff as well is just really outstanding.
It'll be interesting to see whether they can resist turning Luna into something endlessly complicated like every other DAW. I think like Studio One started off nice and stripped down, and now it's like fully featured.
Well, what I've noticed though is that all the updates they've been making as it's progressed. And, that's the other thing that's fantastic about it is they're really listening to the users, and you can submit suggestions, and it seems like they're just coming through weekly. And now it's basically got all the same keyboard shortcuts that Pro Tools uses. So because people have just been going, can you just make the, the screen expanding thing? Can we just have that be the R key and the T key? It's just getting better. But, the Unison thing is great. The Neve summing is awesome, and other than that, it's microphones. I don't know. Like at home, I sing into an SM7 a lot, which we also used in the studio, I think, along with a Neumann of Nick's,
a little KM86.
And I recently got this guy as well, which I really like. It's the Sony C100.
Okay.
I love the SM7. I love the way it flattens everything and kind of. But I did want something else to sing into that had also a bit more, high-end presence and a bit more sheen and sparkle. And the C100's really great for that.
Yeah, it's pitched as like a very high fidelity, sort of, a mic for the 192K sort of generation, as it were.
It's really good. It doesn't color anything, like it's really transparent but super clear.
And so you've used that on your vocals mainly, or on acoustic?
No, not on the record, but I've been using it on vocals lately, and really enjoying it.
Yeah, cool. And Nick, I guess you're saying you're happy to geek out with the best of them, but like, is there anything sort of exciting you gear-wise at the moment, which you've been using?
I've kind of been using the same stuff for about 30 years. It's all really great stuff, but it hasn't. Sure. I mean, I think my computer's probably 2005. I still do 4824, and because I use Pro Tools much more like a tape machine.
Yep.
Than anything else, because I have a console at my disposal, and I still mix on a console, and I still do all that kind of stuff. So it hasn't really changed that much. I've got a couple, like we've used the SM7 on vocals forever. Initially we used it because when tracking the studio, most people would have, the drummer would have headphones, but everyone else would have monitor wedges. In the studio, it was kind of how Brendan O'Brien, who I worked for a really long time as his engineer, liked to set it up. So because people were, most of the rock bands we were working with were really used to that vibe.
Yep.
So having a singer with, a 47 or something really beautiful and expensive, but would also feed back like crazy, wasn't in the cards.
Sure.
And because, the place we worked at and the places we worked at in America that had every kind of mic imaginable, it typically would be the $300 SM7 or the $15,000 251. And there really wasn't much in between. And most of the time, again, the SM7 just had a real, especially for recordings that have a lot of noise, like there's a lot of electric guitars and big drums and things. The SM7 just does a thing where you can just put the voice right in this spot that it's easily heard, but it still sounds like part of the band. And I think people, singers especially, would really react to the idea that I can actually grab this thing. It's not this holy grail that I can't, touch or whatever. It's like I can throw it if I want to, and it's fine. They don't seem to care.
Yeah.
So, and again, that was part of the philosophy that I learned about making records. It's about the artists, the musicians being comfortable and having a good time. And then you put anything in front of if you put anything in front of a good drum kit with a good drummer playing a good song in a good room, you can use anything. And it's going to sound good. I don't mean to. I like the geeky stuff about which mic to use and that stuff. But to me, that's the core of it. If you get that right, you can use not whatever, but you can use things that aren't as
export
precious. I guess would be a term. You don't have to be really precious about all the mics. But so typically, mic setup for me. Guitars are 57s, 86s. I use the 86 for anything. If I had more of them, I would. It's an older Neumann mic. Drums, it's a very typical setup. 421s on the toms. I use an old D12 or a D30 on the kick along with a 421. And everything else is, either 57s or whatever. It's pretty